Welcome back. Today's master class is going to be about permitting and really the process and to getting your permit and how we can help really expedite that whole process. I'm sure you've heard just horror stories from friends about either permits that have been submitted that weren't approved or had just revision after revision. And eventually, after months, the permit finally got through, and then they had to tell you that the schedule, they had to push you off and start another project. Those are all the things that we really eliminate here at Winthorpe by really knowing the process and allowing us to get the permit in early and get it through with as few revisions as possible. I think some of the things that we've really seen change in the permitting process over the years really kind of starts with I'll say post 2015 and then kind of post 2020 and then really to now. And there's a lot of things that have changed. And I know that you see it firsthand, Craig, because you're sort of on the front line with them doing the drawings here and everything. And you want to talk about some of the things that have changed and why really you don't want to wait to get your permit in and get your project started, because things can change as you're doing the drawings.
Absolutely. We're doing this every day. So it used to be you had the design, the plans were ready to submit for permitting, and we could put you on the schedule knowing that the permit would be filed for and released in a matter of days. Worst case, a week or two. But that has all changed, as Scott said, in the past 5-10 years. And now we're seeing longer reviews because staffing at the permits office, the additional reviews that need to be done. So there are more hurdles that we're coming up against.
One of the things that we just talked about last week and we're seeing this over and over again, they have a period of time that they have to review it. So we're submitting everything digitally, and then they have to get back to us. Each county's slightly different. We'll go into that little
back and forth communication. Right. In the old days, it was face to face when you were in the permitting office, but now everything's moved online, which does help in some cases as far as following the process. But it's the communication that's really slack.
And what do we see a lot of times is they'll say, "Oh, we didn't like the way you numbered the plans." Like they haven't even had a chance to review them to say you need to make changes. They're just trying to get in under their deadline to say, "Oh, and it's exactly numbered and done the way we did it the last time, but now, we're going to say no."
Reviewers looking at some
note. This way. I want it A1, and I want your site plan to be at the back instead of the front, and they're doing that just to say that, oh look, we met our deadline, but they really haven't had a chance to look at the plans.
Well, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but we've even heard them say, "Well, I have 15 days to respond for this review or this stage or these comments," and it's like they're trying to extend it to the max. And so that's delaying this process.
I know we recently talked to the health department because we were on a conference call with them, and we were trying to get ahead of it, which we always do. And I know that she said, "Well, I have 15 more days to get this back."
Exactly.
But luckily, because we did call and we got ahead of it, we were able to find those answers out before she actually had formally put it in an email and put it up in Project Docs. We were already working on it, so by the time she had submitted it, we were ready to go. We had the answers. The next day, we uploaded our response in Docs, and then that way, we really saved all that amount of time that they're trying to do.
Exactly. We're not waiting 15 days to respond back to their comments. Absolutely not.
So one of the other things that we're seeing, I'll say differences is in Montgomery County, and this is one of the reasons you just really need to know what the codes are, what the health department in Montgomery County, even though it's a state run, it's still the counties have their own little tweaks that they can do to not only the building code, but also the health department. And Montgomery County has theirs, Howard County, Anne Arundel, Baltimore, and even if it is within, water and sewer that is public, there's still a lot of restrictions as to how we need to tie in. Sometimes it's a new water line, sometimes it's no, we're gonna make you, upsize that whole water line to the house because now we're gonna need to do sprinklers and things like that. And you can go ahead and touch on maybe some of the differences between the different counties and also the district.
Well, a lot of it is the personnel that you're dealing with, and so as some of them are younger, with the changeover of the staff since COVID, and so it's what works, and you have to work with them to figure it out, and it varies by county. So,
But Craig, what are some of the differences between, say, an ADU in Montgomery County versus an ADU in Howard County versus an ADU in the District of Columbia versus Anne Arundel? Let's stick to explain what an ADU is, and then what are the differences in each county?
ADU is an accessory dwelling unit, and in some areas it can be detached, in some areas it needs to be attached to the existing house. And then in other counties like PG County, it's not even allowed at this time. They're working on it, but right now it's not a something they're even allowing at this point. Accessory dwelling unit, we talked about it in other classes, and I think we've got another one coming up. But that's where there's living space, again, either out in a detached building or in addition to the existing, or it can be inside a portion of the existing house where you have independent living, family, in-laws. Some counties will allow for rentals.
Yep.
So there's all kinds of different codes that are, again, like Scott said, by county, by district.
Which is why you need to know what it is.
Working through that.
We just recently had someone come to us and the plans were submitted by a different firm. It was an architectural firm that actually submitted for the permits. It had hung up in there, I think they told us, like, for 3 or 4 months. They asked us, could we review those plans? And unfortunately, we had to redraw, I'll say, a substantial part of the plans and redo the site plan. But what we realized is that they were from a different area. They were drawing it was for Montgomery County. And basically what they didn't realize was that the outline of the house was really dictating the size of the actual ADU, and they were trying to sort of tweak things. And basically we knew that we just had to take that ADU and redraw it so that it met the guidelines. And without knowing what the code and restrictions and requirements of each county are, that's how you get something submitted, and then it turns into the horror story that your friend tells you, say, I was in permitting for 8 months and we can't figure out why we can't get it. And it's because you need to really hire someone that not only does the projects, which it really does help us, not only that we design, but we also build, because we're hearing all the things from, not just from the building review, but we're hearing it also from inspectors in the field, which makes a huge difference. And that way we can use all that knowledge to, I'll say, help us expedite even the next one. And we've done a lot of ADUs at this point, so.
And going back to permitting, one on the Randall project, they wanted to maximize the size of their ADU, and it related back to the size of the existing house. Some of it is the footprint of the house, some is the square footage of the house. And so just by adding a little bit of space on the existing house, we were able to get the full 1,200 square feet in the accessory dwelling unit to maximize, again, the utility of that project.
Which they couldn't have been happier. I mean,
Yes,
and also
they got everything that was on their checklist, the 2 bedrooms, there's some office space, open kitchen. So, and again, it was additional space adding you very functional space up at the house, a 3rd car garage that worked perfectly for the existing house and allowed us to build out, and they loved the new space.
I'd like to go a little bit deeper into this. We touched on it a little bit earlier, but why are the delays increasing? Sort of the key points. And how do we, I hate to use the word workaround because it sounds like we're getting by on something,
Yeah.
but we're not getting by on it. A lot of times it just comes down to, and I know that you've really, I mean, you have that huge library that we pull from to put on our plans. What we do is try to help the permit department understand what the code is actually implying. So that the clearer we make our plans, the reviewer can see whatever the instance is it a new build or is it a full house remodel or is it an ADU? We're putting so much detail on those plans that it's hard for them to come back and ask questions about what did we mean? Where a lot of other firms will put in just the bare
Less
minimum
information.
and get it out there. And then the other thing is we feed, like, so I know the last time we had 2 or 3 comments back. And then we rewrite the answers to those comments, but then we also go into our CAD library and we say, okay, you know what, let's tweak this so that we don't get that question again. But go ahead and touch on what you're seeing, why the delays are increasing. I know you touched a little bit about retirements and things like that, but touch on just a few more things about the delays.
Dealing with the newer staff, again, working with them, that they may not be as familiar with the new codes. Even some of the older codes or the methods of construction. The other one is the newer energy codes. That is something that we're seeing where.
And we're going to touch on that one a little bit later because we have 3 or 4 things that are going to be on that with the energy codes. But the delays, I know that the big thing that we've talked about over and over again, and it's been for years, is that it's not only them getting up to speed the people that they're replacing, and they're replacing them for all different reasons. We know that budget cuts, and we know that there's a lot of things that are happening right now, but these things have happened. I mean, we've been building for 32 years now. We've seen the ups and downs in the housing market. We've seen all the different things, but the counties are always making changes. And unfortunately, as someone gets older, they tend to cost the counties a little bit more. So they're sort of always looking for younger people to bring aboard. And unfortunately, they know the code, but I don't know that they always understand the code. And so knowing it and understanding how to apply it are really kind of 2 different things. And I know you have a number of examples that shows where, okay, this is the code, but when it's applied to this project, it's different than when it's applied to a different project.
Going back to the new hires and different personnel, some of them are coming from other districts, jurisdictions,
right?
And they're familiar with the old, so that's they're relearning, if you will. But working together, again, through this system that they have in place, and it's different from county to county. Typically, they're not working in the office, so there's some delays in
And that
reaching out to them.
delays because it's I leave a message, you email, and then it's a back and forth, and it's never, it, you don't always get to talk to a person, which obviously an email is good, but it's usually good for a quick discussion, not necessarily, a full blown, this is why this works here. I know just recently, there's been a whole thing about the outlets on the end of the cabinets. We know that they're changing it back. On the island, you can actually put and it's kind of up to the individual inspector to, I guess, get his feeling. And I mean, does the homeowner want it? That's how we put him on there, or don't put him on there. But there was a code recently enacted that you couldn't put him on there. Now they've backtracked on that, and that's really where someone that's newer, that hasn't been out in the field or looking at a lot of plans, they don't understand that the that it's something that is allowed again. And there's, you know, I, I'll say there's some pushback when someone says, well, no, it says right here that you can't do it. And then, yes, 3 pages later, it'll have an addendum to that actual code that says, you can if the homeowner wants it. So there's a lot of things that are increasing these delays that really we're trying to combat each time we submit a permit. And really, we do it by just providing more and more information to the county.
In the past, they've looked at where the house is located, that was zoning, and then what's the structure and what's the accessibility, egress, those kinds of things. They would check off that these X amount of things were included in the plans and were good. But these days, we mentioned the energy code, but there's also the electrical vehicles now that are being added, and circuits that are needed for that. And then we talked about the health department requirements. So there's more things that they're looking at, and we work through the different areas and to try to streamline that process. But again, there's delays, and they've lengthened the entire process by adding these reviews in.
Which is why if we can just stay ahead of it, and we don't really touch on this a whole lot because we're not really necessarily doing a lot of comparison to other builders and things. We just really talk about what we do here. Are we a right fit for you, and things like that. But I mean, obviously, when we first started, we didn't have office personnel. And so that made it a challenge. I can't imagine today not having someone in the office, because if you don't have someone there to either, I'll say, get that phone call from the health department. Hey, guess what?
Right.
I'm showing up today, and no, we're on another job. We're, working out there in the field, and that really can add to not only the delays, but it, I know we've touched on this a couple times. Okay, so I pick someone that's a little less expensive. Okay, what am I really saving? If I lose the rate that I got from the bank for this loan, or I have to reapply and pay some sort of penalty to keep the rate that I want, and things like that. Yes, through an extension. There's a lot of things to look into when you're picking somebody and understanding how their process is, and who do they have, and do they have someone that's going to be in the office all the time? They can answer the questions from the county and also the homeowner. And
so we have the experience, and we have the team that's working together on a daily basis to work through this permitting process for your project. Back in the day, again, you would get all the design work, get the plans already, getting ready for submitting, and we would then get you on the schedule as it was being reviewed. As I mentioned, just days, a couple of weeks through the permitting process. But now we've got to wait weeks, months, really, because it's an unknown. We have to work and coordinate scheduling so that we don't lose your spot. on our schedule, and so there's a lot more coordinating there.
Let's talk about some of the impacts that we got into just a little bit earlier on. The new energy codes, the new really health department requirements, and really the site development requirements, because those really have all changed, and they've not only they changed in the last 5 years, they've really changed in the last 2 years, and really even 1 year with the health department. And why don't you just talk about some of the well, let's start with the energy, and then we can go into stormwater management, and then we'll go into the health department.
Well, so you have additional insulation and building sciences now that we're incorporating to our projects. The additional, you talked a little bit about the EV requirements, and even potentially in some areas, the question of natural gas, propane, things like that.
Yeah.
So all those things are going to contribute greater proportions into the cost of the project. And so energy, there's been a debate of, how long will it take for you to recoup your costs down the road on the increased energy.
Which we get a lot of questions on that one. Oh, aren't these codes always better? And yeah, there's plenty of codes that, yes, things need to change, yes. But then there's the question of some of the codes where, are you really saving any money? What is the return on what you're doing? And we talk about it before obviously we get into the actual drawing stage. But it's always a question is it good to go with say a higher rated HVAC unit, and we do those calculations, and you'll see a lot of times it isn't. Most of the time it isn't.
There are some things that sound great on paper.
Yep.
And this just makes sense to do. The reviewers, the code, it makes sense to do this. The politicians, let's do this. But then sometimes in reality, it doesn't work out that way.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing. And what you don't want to do is wait to get your permit and then have these requirements be mandates. We'll talk through all the different things you can do. And it's funny, I heard you talking to someone about, do you build to code? And I don't think we build anything to code. We build much higher than
code is the minimum.
Yeah, the bare minimum. So, you want someone that's going to give you those options. Do we do additional insulation in the attic because we want to have storage up there? Maybe we want to make it into living space later on. And so we take all those things into account, but you really don't want necessarily the county saying that you have to do these things. And it's because you waited to get your permit. And now these things that were options a year before now are things that you have to do.
And we can include those things that we know works. We'll include those in the plans and the submittal. And 99% of the time they're saying, looks great, let's do that. And then sometimes if they have any questions, we'll work through it, as we've said, and then and get the plan approved.
One of the things that I wanted to touch on just a little bit more is how we stay ahead of the building codes. And one of the things that we do is we attend a number of seminars, and there's not as much, I'll say, in person anymore, where we used to go to the in-person ones. But now most of them, which is convenient, is either Zoom or whatever, but we're in contact with all the counties. So we are, I know we just attended a recent one with Montgomery County that did a pretty informative Zoom on the changes that they were making and implementing in their county. And that's really the best way to stay ahead of things.
It's helpful, and so it's run by the different county department heads, usually in the permitting division, and they offer these, and we always are participating in that. And some will even do sort of like a focus group that they'll ask and ask for details and see how it's working, and so we provide that feedback to them, and so we volunteer as much as possible and gather that information. So we're informed, we're up to date, and even helping work through that process with the county.
Which is what we tell everybody. If you're ready to go and the money's in place and you have what you want to do, don't wait. Because they're gonna push. I say push, they're gonna work, there's gonna be new requirements every year.
Right.
And it may be some that you agree with and you want to do. But what we're seeing more and more is things that people don't necessarily want to do. And they're being required to spend their money on things that they're not really seeing. It's not important to them and they're not really seeing the advantage of doing those things. I know that with the EVs, I mean, that is a requirement in Maryland, you have to have one, either a remodel or new home. Now they're talking about having two. And the challenge is that, that's 80 amps, could be as much as 100 amps, depending on the charger. And you're taking away from that power. So now you need to either do a heavy up or, what are those things that you have to do?
It is rare that you could add that amount of circuitry to the house, an existing house, and not have to do a heavy up. So that's adding cost to the project. But, is there ways that we could work through the renovation by changing over to gas or propane on equipment, if that's something that you would like to add to your home, then that is that an option. But as far as other things, insulating the house, and that's going to make for a tighter house that we're building these days, that's required per the energy code. That may trigger the need for fresh air intakes, things like that. So we're working through all of these and building the homes, as we said, above code, and trying to work through the best and most cost-effective way to build a house that you're going to love and it's going to be comfortable and meet all the current requirements. But what I was going to say earlier is, through this process, get the permit done, have that in your pocket so that gives you the ability to pull the trigger on starting a construction. Get it, we would have you on the schedule. And then you have what those costs are, those are set. So much happens once we have the designs, the plans completed, the permit in hand, then we're ready to go at a time that works for the schedule and works for you.
And that's what I was just going to say. So really the key points really is don't wait. Submit the permit as early as possible. Don't have to have all the details on there, cabinet wise and things like that. Have all the details that we know that the newer reviewers are going to be looking for. Expect some revisions because they're going to have something to say, and it just might be that they've run out of time and they're going to say, "Oh, we want you to renumber your cover page or whatever it may be." But expect some revisions. We always say know the zoning before you start. Don't get into you've drawn it, you've submitted it, and now you're finding out that zoning isn't going to approve it, because that's really the second step of the permitting process is it's got to go to zoning. So if it gets kicked out, then you're probably making changes to the plan. So you want to make sure that you know what the zoning is, which is one of the first steps that we always do. And know that the building lead time, okay. It's, a lot of people say, all right, I'm gonna start this project now, but how do they get into our schedule? And it's really by us controlling that permitting process and us knowing the permitting process, saying, someone else may have told you, yes, it's only gonna take 2 months. I would ask them, how many projects have they done like this? And how many projects have they done in whatever county we're talking about? Because ultimately, you can do all the planning, but if you're planning with the wrong numbers, it doesn't help anybody. And then what we hear all the time is, as well, it was because of permitting that now we're not starting your project, not only for the 3-4 months it's taking for permitting, but now we're on another project and we're not finishing there for 4 months. So, you hear from someone who says, oh, it was because of permitting. Some of the delays are because of permitting, but a lot of it's because the builder didn't know what the process was getting through the permitting. Yes, and said, oh, I can get this in 2 months, and then, oh, I can, and now it's another 2 months, and now I'm gonna start this other project, where we pretty much have down what's going on. We know, because we have submitted early, that we've, I'll say, scheduled for a couple delays at the county. So we're not thinking, if we think it's gonna take 3 months, we're pretty much figuring on 4 months. So that we know that that process can completely play itself out, and we can still keep you on our start schedule on the production side.
One other thing is, in our questionnaire, when we initially meet and start discussing the design of the project and your vision and goals for the project, one of our key questions is do you have a back end deadline? Is there a wedding or a family event or a birth of a child, that kind of thing? So
gotta get the kids into school.
Yes,
how many times do you hear that?
Or parents are moving into that house. That's a big one, especially on the accessory dwelling units. So knowing that upfront, asking that question to our clients, it's so helpful that we can then work it backwards. And yes, we're taking into account, like Scott's saying, how long is this permit process going to take? And so we add that into our schedule and our timing of things, so that we can make sure that we're still on target for that deadline.
So we're trying to get the permit as early as possible, is what we're saying, because that way we can be finishing up a project and we can have the permit in hand, and we can start discussing the site development. We can start discussing what actually needs to be done on site before the production actually starts.
That opens all the doors. We use that time wisely while we're waiting during the permitting process, working on selections, finalizing the working drawings, or if there's, hey, Craig, Scott, we've been looking through the plans and we think that maybe this room should be a little bit different, or we move this door here. So you're not locked in once we've started to submit for the permits, so we can make subtle changes to the plan. So we're doing that also during this process. But at least, again, that permit application has been submitted, and the county or the district is working on it.
Yep. So I hope today's masterclass has really helped you understand the permitting process. If nothing else, I hope you take away that you want to get started as soon as possible, and expect some revisions, expect some delays in the permit process. But if the builder understands, like we do, what needs to be done, it should be smooth. And you can't just blame everything on the county that, oh, this is why it happened. We know that there's challenges at the county, and we take that into account. So we're gonna work back, like Craig said. Here's the deadline. We need to have the mother-in-law move in. We need to have the kids in school. Whatever it is, we're going to work from that deadline back, and we're going to help you understand what we can do to make sure that all those things happen, and that you're in your home, you're in your new renovation. The in-laws are in their ADU, whatever the case may be. So if you're thinking about a project and I would just emphasize, get started now, give us a call, fill out the contact form. We're more than happy to talk you through what we think your project will take.
Answer any questions you may have or questions or concerns about how the design build process works and how we can fit our process and complete your project.
Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you.